This tutorial picks up where the last tutorial on classes and objects has left off. So at this time, we've got a class called dot that has two methods, display and move, and we've called those methods on two objects that we've created, Dotty and Spotty. In this tutorial, we are going to make an array of objects from the same class. The only thing I've done that I've changed is I've made the objects a little bit smaller because we're going to make a bunch of them on the screen. So instead of making just two objects individually, we're going to make an array of objects, which is an easy way to make a whole bunch of objects really quickly. So I'm going to delete in draw where we'd called those methods on those objects. I'm going to delete where we initialized them, and I'm going to delete where we declared them. So an array is an ordered list. And you can make an array of any data type in processing. You can have an array of integers, you can have an array of floating point decimals, you can have an array of strings, which is words. And in this case, we're making an array of objects. So we're going to treat the class name just like a data type by putting those two square brackets after it. And that says, instead of creating one dot object, I want to make an array of objects from class dot. So I've got my square brackets, and then I'm going to come up with my object name. So I'll just say Dotty again. So dotty equals new, and new dot, and I'm going to say the class name again. I'm going to open that square bracket again, but instead I'm going to put the number of objects I want to make, the number of objects in my array. So I'm going to put 100 inside those square brackets to say I'm going to make 100 dot objects. Now, there's no such object name as Dotty anymore. When you make an array, you have lots of Dotty objects now. You have Dotty 0 is an object, Dotty 1 is an object, and so on and so forth, all the way up to Dotty 99 in square brackets. So I can't ever just say Dotty anymore when I'm calling methods on the object. I have to refer to them with these numbers. So I've just made 100 objects from this one array, but now I've got to refer to them as such. I've got to address them individually. So that's not very efficient to do that. So we use something called a for loop. So I can loop through and address them all very quickly. So I've declared them up here. I still have to initialize them. So I'm going to initialize them in a for loop. So the way a for loop works is a for loop has a little counter variable, and usually we use I. So I'm going to say for, open up parentheses, int I. That means make a local variable I, local to this loop even. Local int I is less than 100. That means for as long as I is less than 100, and then I'm going to say I++, that means count up each one, and I'm going to open a bracket and close a bracket. So this says loop through whatever is between these two brackets for as long as I is less than 100, and don't do anything else in the program until you've gone through this whole loop. So it's, int I equals 0. Oops, that's a big mistake. I left off int I equals 0. I'm making that local variable I, but I have to set it to equal to 0 for as long as I is equal to 100. When you're counting up by ones, do what's in here. So it's going to actually loop through this 100 times. I is going to be 0, then I is going to be 1, I is going to be 2, I is going to be 3. Keep looping through. Do whatever you put in here 100 times before it breaks the loop and moves on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize these objects. But instead of saying Dotty 0, Dotty 1, Dotty 2, I'm going to say Dotty I. And that I is actually going to stand in for all those numbers 0 to 99. So it's going to initialize Dotty 0, it's going to initialize Dotty 1, Dotty 2, Dotty 3, all the way up to Dotty 99. So, and I'm just going to initialize it with a constructor name, just like if it weren't an object that's in an array, but that I actually is standing in for all the numbers 0 through 99. So you've initialized 100 objects really quickly. I'm going to use the same for loop with local variable I. Don't forget to set it equal to 0 in this case. To call my two methods, display and move on I. So again, I've got to say dotty I can't say just plain old dotty. So I'll say dotty I display, so that means call display on all 100 of my dotty objects, and dotty I dot move. So now I should make 100 objects moving across the screen. Just a note, if I want them to start off screen, I'm going to come down here in my class and look at my parameters for my randomness. If I want them to start off screen and then slowly move on screen, I'm going to have, instead of them going starting out at between 0 and 500, I'm going to have them start out maybe between negative 300 and 0, so they're all off screen to the left of where the output window will be, and then they move on screen. Yep, just a little aside.